recording. Just wanted to let you all know what our purpose was for this. It's really just to train our internal staff. So like I had mentioned, feel free to drop questions in the comment box or unmute yourself if you have a comment or anything you want to say during the presentation is quite good with us. So for those who aren't familiar with Willis, our main purpose in the marketplace is to inspire. Mark, are you going to add people to the meeting? Can you do that?
I don't.
No,
I don't see anything that says I can. So
that's fine. I can do two things at the same time. For those of you who are not familiar with Willis, our main purpose in the marketplace is really fourfolds: inspire, educate, solve, and supply market and global leading surfacing materials. We have what we call material application specialists in each of your markets. And you're probably wondering, well, what's a material application specialist? Well, they're very similar to a product rep, but there's so much more than that. Our teams go through rigorous training on all of our products. So when you're talking to one of our material application specialists, don't be afraid to talk about acoustics and reflectivity and anti-fingerprint. Where's this material really good for? Is it good for exterior or interior? What's the thermal expansion of this material? So our team is very familiar with all the different characteristics of all of our products and can really help you choose the right material for your application. So both form and function are there and as expected. So today we bring you a blend of, we've got a lot of people joining in, very exciting. Today we bring you a blend of inspiration and learning about Corian solid surface and Corian Quartz latest aesthetics for 2024. This launch of 4 Corian solid surface colors and 3 Corian Quartz aesthetics combine insight to upcoming color trends and the investment and research and development from DuPont, which both bring solutions for commercial and residential applications. From traditional countertops to vanities, cladding bathrooms, windowsills, reception desks, transactional counters, really the possibilities are endless with Corian solid surface and Corian Quartz. So I'm confident that as we unfold this presentation, you're going to see colors that you're going to want to use immediately in projects that you're probably working on now. So let me take this opportunity to introduce Mark Woodman. He is a color specialist at Corian Design. He's been with Corian Design for decades, helping them sorry, I'm doing two things at the same time here. Bringing color trends and where the market is lacking something in our portfolio. So to that, I'm going to pass it over to Mark to take over the presentation.
And I lost sharing. I think you have to make me presenter again.
Okay, I will do that now.
Tech, love it.
Tech, love it.
Hi, everybody.
Presenter.
There we go.
There we go.
It's magic. Has it come through yet? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I can see. I think you have to click on your PowerPoint. There you go. And if you make that full screen, we should be good.
Oh. Not the one I wanted, though.
Oh, okay.
That's funny. That's okay. We'll do it this way. There we go. Was supposed to start there. Perfect. Well, anyway, hello, everybody, and thank you. And John, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for Willis for the opportunity. It has been an amazing journey because not only have we been looking at aesthetics that we know the market wants and that we are excited about, but also we've been looking at new ways of doing some of the aesthetics, especially in solid surface, and then bringing in some new aesthetics in quartz as well, and looking at so many different levels of what we want from a business standpoint, because we know at the end of the day, these have to be things that are good for designers, architects, facilities managers, fabricators, or anyone who's doing specification work to have the right pieces available to us. So we look at costs, we look at aesthetics, all of it becomes part of that. And at the end of the day, it always has to look good and fill the right niche for things. And one of the biggest things we looked at, and this is still an outgrowth of things that came originally actually from the pandemic, was people's need to connect to nature in a major way. The need for that varied differently depending on where you are in the world and how people, and I still think 4 years later we're still talking about this a bit, but it's still quite valid. But people's necessity to connect with nature, to be outside if they could be. Some people couldn't be in any way, shape, or form. Others were out in it all the time and were just really enjoying it, thinking, thank goodness we have this. So it brought us to a really big look at nature's canvas and our engagement with it. Of course, as we look at sustainability, recycling, all the other things that we're looking into in manufacturing products, we look at nature as the overarching theme for that as well. So what I wanted to share with you today is how we're interpreting a lot of these looks, what we're looking at in nature, just instead of it just being a big overarching theme, what else we're looking at in this to come up with these designs. As John said, I've had the great privilege of working with Corian Design for quite a number of years. It has been over 10 years, not quite decades, but more than one. And it's truly fascinating all the time to see how far we can push things or try to push things within some level of reason, and then still have things work, make it exciting, make it interesting, sometimes make it easy in a respect as well. So looking at our inspirations, we broke this down into 3 categories as we looked at nature in a broader sense: water, terrain, and atmosphere, and how they affect us, what we look at from them, and then also how they start to influence and inspire actual design, not only design elements, but colors as well for those. So we look at water. Water has so many different things to it. It can be very quieting. It can be very powerful. Any number of ways you can look at it, whether it's like for the cascades here from a waterfall or just the tranquility of a lake. And we respond so well to that as humans in that it's also very, I don't want to repeat words on screen in front of you, but they're good for this. It's nurturing. We are composed of quite a bit of water and we need it. It's part of our life force. It is a life force element as well as just being pretty when we look at it, or just thinking, is it beautiful to see a lake or the beach and the water, coming into the beach. It is sinuous when it flows and rolls over things. It's got a beauty to that we were trying to capture in some of our areas is in design. It's cleansing. It is something we look at to clean things away, to wash things away, to brighten things very often as well. So all of these elements, we were talking all these things all the time as we were looking at designs. And one of them, the word here is infused or infusion. And this actually bounces about with a little bit with atmosphere. And those two combine in a way, certainly from a sense of moisture and wetness. And I'll come up to that in a moment as we go through with those. So the next one we looked at actually is terrain. This was the very grounding element of nature that we were looking at, what keeps us in a solid state, what grounds us, which gives us comfort, which makes us comfortable, makes us feel safe in a sense as well. This is where you found the biggest power in neutrals. We've seen the last few years, we had the big play with grays and cooler neutrals. We saw how that was coming through. I had a joking little bit of a presentation I gave on one point called beige is not a dirty word, and it was the early coming of the warming of colors, certainly the warming of neutrals. And it's the combination of those, as nature has both cools and warms at the same time. We started looking at how those play off with one another. It is certainly, this plays off the biggest biophilic element of that continues to grow as a major influence and inspiration for design, certainly in architecture, but also in interiors as well. How do we as human beings connect with nature, bring it into our living space, and play with that all the time? And what elements do we have of that? If it's not an actual plant, then what can we do to help convey that and bring that to us in a thought process within the space? Metamorphic, organic, all of these things that come out of it. I mean, Quartz, the stones are metamorphic at their base level. So we always look at that too. It's like, what are the veining? What is the look of it? How strong is it? How quiet is it? I'll talk a little bit about those two as we move further through some of these areas. And then there's atmosphere. And atmosphere is the one we found really kind of was the most calming. And that when we talked with consumers and did some voice of consumer questioning and testing, and that's what came back all the time. It's like, oh, I lay back and I look at the sky and I see clouds, sort of wispy clouds going by, and this sort of misty and calming, and comforting as well. Where grounding can be comforting, it's also comforting to see these beautiful blue skies float away. And it gives you not only the chance to breathe, but to take a breath. So the freshness, the lightness of the sky played into this, as well as we look at all of these pieces. And this went across not only our solid surface, but also our new Quartz launches as well. So I'll talk a little bit about the new solid surface. We'll start off with that. We have 4 new solid surface, although we're also talking a little bit, and you'll see a video on this. I'm not going to spend time on these, but the across the bottom are our recent launches from last year. And they were an early talk about this, with our connection to nature, with a lot of the terrain stone looks that are in there, the woods that are in there, and we're playing further off of that. One thing we looked at on colors of these were the muted colors of nature, not quite going super strong, because we know that as we're still transitioning from cooler grays, a lot of those colors, into beiges and more muted neutrals, that the colors need to play that well also. So as we looked at them, we pulled them back a little bit slightly. And also, if you look at nature, there are a lot of beautifully muted colors in nature on its own, but also that it represents sort of an early version of nature and then a later version of nature. So from early in the morning, before the sun really pulls up and the sky is a little bit different, the color is a little softer, and it ends that way as well. So we were also looking at colors flowing from one time of day to the other, and how it affects the colors and the light of color in a general sense. Flowing aesthetics of that coming from, of course, from the water inspiration on this in nature, looking at really iconic designs. And this is where we're pushing new directions to get calacatas and bold stone looks into play. And we've had amazing success with these. I'll share with you that the early versions of these, they just officially released this month. We did some previews already at the International Builder Show, with the Kitchen and Bath Industry Show in Las Vegas, and the results were great when we finally saw the really big pieces on display, and the response from attendees was just off the charts. We were just thrilled with what we had. And with that, I'll share a little bit of something without my voice and a little bit of interlude to show the new pieces. So hopefully you recognize some of those. As I said, there's some of them from the last year's introductions are in and soft launches as we went through. But let's talk about the ones for this year. So Artista Mist with this really soft, pulled back blue. We knew how important blue is and remains, but it's starting to shift a little bit and has to be more of a transitional blue compared to the richer cobalt navies that have been out for the last couple of years. Still important. Those are not going away, but we knew what the other level needed to be of this. This one is very much something that's ethereal and sort of like you could put your hand through it almost. It's got a multi-layered look to it. Hence where the word atmospheric came up from some of these. And some of the stuff is that we're seeing in actually real life, the amount of infusion that we're seeing these, for instance, this diffuser that you can put on a desktop and have scents and a little bit of moisture come into the space. Looking at teas and what we drink, that the drinks are infused, water has to be infused. A lot of that and the mists that come of that and the movement from that in a general sense. When you see that flowing, all these things all flow and are soft, very, very much influence the design for this piece. And then pulling out in the color on that, how do we introduce a color that is highly usable, still fresh, has movement going forward? We're seeing colors like this come up all the way into 2026 in trend movement, or directional movement internationally in colors. So we're on that track effectively. In a space, we wanted to show this. We thought it perfect to show in a really grand bathroom, although in a fairly simple bathroom, it can be just as beautiful because of its uplifting feel, and it's soft and warm, and it feels like if you've entered this almost sauna-like space, but not when it feels heavy and overly done. It's a real uplifting feel to it. And then started looking at all the different ways these can be used. And John mentioned some earlier, which was great. We certainly see this in the right kitchen with the right finishes. Actually, it's really, really good with a lot of wood tones. That blue blends beautifully off with a number of woods. And of course, with whites, it winds up looking very fresh, almost nautical at that point in a different way, a more soothing nautical sense. Beautiful in shower walls, vertical applications, as we've seen here just in the walls in general, obviously bath vanities. This particular design, the sinks were actually designed and made the integral sinks out of the same material. So it all becomes one look to the whole piece. A space that's comforting and really kind of just nice to be in when you're in the space, which is what we wanted because we thought this mist, Artista Mist, needs to be something that feels like that it has concern and it feels marvelous when you're in the space. The next one is Artista Sage. Now, there's two of these Artistas, and they join the four that we launched a couple of years ago as an aesthetic family. So these are actually line extensions, but these brought color into it. The others are very much neutral in warms, cools. So this brought a lot more color in it. This is where we looked at a little bit of terrain and grounding this with Sage. It's very herbal feeling. It's very pulled back. It's very muted. So the green is very subtle. The veining that runs through it has a gray cast to it. So again, it becomes a really good transition color. For a lot of these, it's still very fresh feeling though. It does feel new. It does feel very much like nature when you see it, even as subtle as it is. And this flows into a little bit when I just talked about Artista Mist. It finds up in Artista Sage as well, with teas and aromatics being spices and herbs, that you get a sense of those and that those infusions happen as well. That's beautiful flowing lines to this. And this particular one, we wanted to show this a little bit differently. So we actually did this in a commercial space and then played a little bit more what we can do with the material. So we know that we can do kitchens and baths. These would be marvelous in those. It's certainly very unnatural feeling in a kitchen with that color. Again, great with whites, great with wood tones, and all kinds of different values and colors on it. But in commercial look, we thought it was kind of fun. So we put this as a planter because solid surface is inherently water resistant. So it's a great thing to do that. It won't stain. If a little water fills to the front of it, it won't warp. And marvelous design for that. And then also routed the backdrop in that little niche on the side and then fronted the entire elevator. And it's a nice play on this as well because you see with the stainless steel on the elevator door how it plays off the gray in that, but doesn't look gray. It still lifts up very, very well. It was designed for and it's proving to really good healthcare and wellness color. because those spaces, they want to have a direct connection to nature. They want something calming and quieting for not only patients, but for the healthcare staff as well, that they feel sort of a connection to all of that. So it's nice to see this in a commercial space. And healthcare and wellness, it's interesting that sometimes there's certainly commercial spaces, but they can actually feel a little residential. Sometimes if you get into patient care rooms, you want as much of that as possible. And this is a way of achieving that from a design standpoint. The next one, this is when we moved into some of our new iconic looks, and this is Calcutta Grayish. And that name is very specific. It is gray and beige mixed together. To form that, this was very much warm and cool. And we knew, again, we have kitchens in the marketplace, just to use kitchens as an example, that have gray cabinetry, that people want to make a move and kind of start moving away from that and warming that space up a little bit. This is the perfect way of doing it. There are gray veins that reflect that, but then also some warm colors that do that as well. There's a real sense of calm and ease to this, despite the veining. The veining isn't super bold. It's a quieter, pulled back look to it. As you'll see, we have this in a room set, and then we went kind of a little further out on some of the design work on this. So it's a full backsplash on this. It's a countertops, but also on this contemporary island, it's been thermoformed and routed as well in the design. So you actually get some more texture out of it in something that's a little quieter. And if you want to make something very classic as far as the inspiration is designed, and then do something a little more contemporary with the piece. And it's something that's always exciting because Solid Surface has all these capabilities, and you can really you can imagine and push the wow factor a little bit further in them on that. Certainly great in showers as well, in bathrooms. As a vertical surface, you would have the marble look. And the brilliant thing about that is that there's essentially no grout lines on anything to clean and do work with on that, because it's just a smooth finish. So it's a great thing in bathrooms. We're seeing more and more all the time in bathrooms, and certainly showers being done in Solid Surface just for that reason alone. It's really quite marvelous. And a lot of marble looks like this. I'm seeing some of the terrazzos as well. But the marble looks are being used in some instances in windowsills, because they are impervious pretty much to water and little stains and things like that. If the window's left open, you don't have to have all the damage to the wood, and the paint, they don't have to be painted. Then you have a beautiful natural stone look in the space. It's a marvelous way of looking at that. And then in both hospitality and single family, and some apartments as well, or condominiums, is what's being called as arrival rooms. And the arrival rooms started in residential, and they're now moving a little bit to hospitality as well, to hotels, in that it at one time was called a mudroom, but they're so much grander or nicer than they were just as a mudroom to kick your shoes off, hang out a coat, and walk into the house. It's actually a place to arrive, to lay things out, to have a moment of transition from outside to inside, or in the sense of a hospitality in a hotel room, from the hallway into your actual space you'll be staying. And they're very often going into foyer areas now in hotels, and you can leave things there, kind of little reminders. It's where the coffee maker is going instead of in the room, and it becomes a different sort of space within that room. And it's this particular one's a beautiful aesthetic for that, because it's a good transition look as well. The boldest one is new Stonecrest Smoke. It is incredibly powerful when you look at it. It's got a lot of drama. And this one, we did something to this that we also did with Calcutta Grayish, that I should mention as you go back on that. Calcutta Grayish's base is cameo white, which is a very highly used aesthetic for us. It's also one of our sink colors. So if you do an integrated sink in cameo white, you automatically have a coordination to the background color of the aesthetic. And Stonecrest Smoke, we used lots of gray. It's all just values of gray, and this in glacier white as a background color on that. And it does influence it a little bit, but it's a great way of incorporating that color sink in with this as well, if you want. But a beautiful look to this. It's incredibly bold. It's sort of a game changer. Nothing else like this is currently in the marketplace for Solid Surface. It's an extremely unique look at nature. It's not veining that you see normally. We wanted to push the envelopes on this, and there's a little bit of effervescence to this in some of it, as well as the really strong veins, and it's got a phenomenal look in space. You see how terrific this can look with black. It's beautiful in backsplashes in kitchens. It is, again, a statement island if you want to do that. And it's also marvelous, again, for hospitality, depending on what your message is and how bold you want that to be to make a statement. It can also be reception for office. This could be a terrific office building reception space, either across the top of it or even facing the front of a reception desk, or be used on smaller tables around a space. We have a lot of places where they do that instead of doing, they'll just buy a base and then sort of hack a great coffee table, but use aesthetics like this to put on the tabletops to kind of bring in, to either coordinate within a space or to really make the space, incredibly unique. So moving from solid surface, which we're excited about those, we also are very excited about what we've done with our quartz offerings. Quartz is still a major component and certainly in kitchens in North America. And we wanted to play across very different aspects of it to help people move into the quartz world that maybe not have been able to previously. And we still wanted to make sure that they were very high-end looks. So I'll talk about that a little bit as I go through and what we did with a couple of them very specifically. We're soft launched last year, and they're officially part of the launch this year. The aesthetics are still very natural. We were still looking very much at nature as a major influencer on these. We curated the quartzite. So we have two quartzite aesthetics, which we are very excited about. The look of quartzite is still a major mover. But we started looking as to what the definition of it is, and it's very broad. So there's some flowy quartzite looks in nature, and there's some very strong, bold, directional, sharp looks as well. And when most people were questioned, that's what I thought of. So that's the direction we took. We thought we need to narrow this down to what is sort of iconic quartzite. And we landed on those, and then looked at, again, expanding some of our more iconic designs, our Color Cut Natura, and what much more to the family could we bring to that. And I'll talk about that as we go through. But first, a musical interlude with visuals. So a beautiful piece to start with is smoked quartzite. Omnidirectional, this one has a terrific, bold look to it. And it's also interesting what's come with some of these with this type of aesthetic, in that you're actually getting a little bit more out of material, because there's a specific section that maybe doesn't have as much. It's got a lot going on just in general. So it's really interesting to cut around and work with it in different ways within a fabricated space and when you're laying it out, which is great fun. It is essentially grays. We still know how important that is and how that's going to move through, but there are small warm brown veins running through it, which give it a bit of an earthier look to it, but also help it transition as well within the design space, almost anywhere that you want to use this. It feels very contemporary. It can feel just as traditional depending on what works with it as far as the elements are concerned, either in furnishings, cabinetry, just a general design space, what the walls are like and the ceilings, everything else in the space. We actually chose excuse me, to put this in a bathroom. And there's something else that's interesting that happens with it. So there's a lot of light coming into this space, which lightens it a little bit. And that's kind of the marvelous part of this particular quartz, in that it shifts slightly, not in a bad way. It always remains what it is at the end. And if you look at the bottom underneath that the cabinetry, you can actually see how it's maintains its deeper color. But it's marvelous that through the day it kind of has a little bit of a change, which adds to its authenticity, adds to its naturalness, even more so. It's very much a great statement island, either in a kitchen or in hospitality and retail. It can do the exact same thing in that and be a great bold look on a cash wrap area, reception desk, extra table seating, conference table. It could be beautiful in something like that. And then, of course, be used in kitchen and bath in residential. We're very excited about this particular piece. It does push the envelope a little bit more in the look, in what Quartz products can offer with a quartzite aesthetic. And it's joined with estate quartzite. And this one, it was fun working on the design. So we were looking very specifically on the types of blues. I mentioned navy blue earlier, that it's not going away. And we have some in the line already. We needed to shift a blue slightly that could cross amongst a couple of them. This actually looks really good with navy blue, but it looks good with softer grade blues as well. It's very interesting how this one can be sort of chameleon-like with the blues. And this was both earth and sea inspired. And most of the blue veining has a slightly bubbly, percolating look in it, which you can see in some of the veins in here. The brown veins, the more warm, earthy colored veins in this, are simpler and more like striations that you'd find in the earth. So even though they all flow, they have a slightly different personality to one another. I'm truly looking at sort of nature as an architect on these, and what does it give us, and then how do we interpret that for the design. A great looking piece with a real nice, simple background to it, it's got little bits going on to it. And here it is with a navy blue. We still wanted to play up that and show how nicely the blue in this plays with that and transitions, and showing this in lots of different spaces, not only the waterfall island, but of course the backsplash as well, and what it can do with that. Family spaces, because it's a real easygoing design and color palette. So it's easy to incorporate into the design space for a family room, for say in a house or a townhome, or just any family gathering space. Again, it makes a terrific tabletop, either in residential or certainly in commercial work, like for a conference table or something like even either large or small. Calcutta medallion. This is part of our iconic series as we were looking at expanding the Calcuttas, and this brought gold into place. We've seen it for the last couple of years. We've certainly seen it in plumbing fixtures and hardware in residential. It has shown up in lighting for commercial work as well, within spaces, and it's a beautiful way of incorporating a little bit of gold without being glitzy, without being over the top, because we know that nature wants to do these very often in subtle ways. So the veining is very soft and very subtle, with bits of this golden cast running through it, not quite an ochre color running through it, but similar, and then incorporating into gray veins, because again, this gives us that transition between warms and cools, and also this one being as iconic as it is as a stone look, transitions beautifully between modern and traditional design. They can work into either one just beautifully in that respect. Even taking a look at this when I was pulling images, this very sort of contemporary look bowl in a matte gold finish against very traditional, old, ancient architecture within this space, with the ceiling and the column going up and the color combination in there, which is very reminiscent of all of this. And in the design space, we got to play with our kitchen a lot and tear things out and redo them. Look at this one again with browns, and how great this is with browns and off-whites, because that's just a beautiful color cast to it. And it plays very well with lots of finishes. It looks just as good with off-whites and lighter browns as it does with darker browns. It plays with white. Very interesting how it transitions between all of those different finishes and colors with those. Just an elegant way of interpreting either contemporary or traditional design within a space. Certainly vertical and horizontal spaces, I mentioned before, hospitality and a number of them, it plays really well here as well because there's so many other ways and looks that a space can work in those. It certainly works in formal spaces. It can have a great formality to it if that's what you want. And that's sort of purpose designed into them as to how far you push the veining, how strong it is, soft it is, and what you do with it. So, and then of course, as we looked at what nature does with it, we were able to interpret that as well with this piece. Now, we soft launched two aesthetics, one of being quiet white and the other hush gray, which I'll show in a moment. And they were designed for a different level. They're different affordability, but we love the fact that we could bring something in on a level that can get people into this easily and feel comfortable moving into a product category that may have been out of reach for them. But we also wanted it to be accessible and natural and still elegant and not look cheap, for lack of another word. And I'll just say that. It has an elegance to this as well, and a richness to the color that was very purposeful. So it's very warm. It is part of that power in neutrals that I mentioned earlier that nature gives us. It is an off-white that we did not have in our collection, or a white we didn't have in the collection. So we looked very much and did studies between the versions that we have of whites and off-whites. So where are we lacking? And this was something we could get into it. It falls very much into the quiet luxury category, which has been talked about for a while. It's still ongoing. It's starting to move a little bit as sort of a talking point, and has now just become something. Yes, this is a category that we have of aesthetics and looks, and it falls very much into that. It's a very comforting color. It's very soft. The aesthetic with the particulates in it is very easygoing. Not everybody wants to be knocked out in the morning with a beautiful statement island. Nothing wrong with it. It is a brilliant alternative, and we certainly love the designs of those. But sometimes you just kind of need a quieter space to have your coffee in the morning, and these are perfect ways of doing that. Hence the name, even Quiet White, and its cousin that I'll talk about in a moment, Hush Gray. Those names came up very, very purposeful in this. Now, this particular space, we actually worked with Cameo White, and the backdrop is a routed solid surface. I talked earlier about the wow factor and being sort of feeling inspired by things to do with solid surface. So instead of actually having grouted tile back there, that's all routed solid surface as a backdrop. So the colors work and the design works, and you have a great look for these herringbone tiles, but without all the work of grouting and cleaning that and having, when you cook, that winds up, the oils and the things when they fly around, the grease can get into the veins. It doesn't happen with this. It's a wipe down and you're done. So it's really marvelous on that. This is certainly a great look in commercial restaurants, very specifically, because there's lots of different looks you go through as far as aesthetics are concerned and design styles within a space. It also is really good looking under lots of plates for food because it doesn't fight what's going on there. So there's lots of things about this and its neutrality and its comfort and its ease of design that we're very excited about. Now, Hushed Gray is a slightly different. It almost has a bit of an industrial vibe because of its grayness. And again, I said earlier, even though we know the warm movement from gray, but grays will never go away. Gray is always a marvelous classic. This one sits in between grays we didn't have. So we have some that are lighter, some that are darker, some that are very much darker. And this is a great way of sitting in between them. It's very similar in design to Quiet White with the particles. It's a very balanced feeling. This one's very simple and grounded. We like that very much. It has a slightly more contemporary feel. So we thought the two of them kind of balanced one another that way as well. And here is it in space with an integrated Corian sink, because you can integrate solid surface sinks into a quartz countertop. Not everybody knows that. It's a great way of having a seamless integration there. And the background, if you look at that, there's a solid surface done in an elongated subway tile look as well, playing off of that. So we have that playing in here as well. It's a great workroom aesthetic. Arrival rooms that I mentioned earlier, sort of a way of kind of coming into the space and an easy neutral way of playing with that, wherever you're doing with the space. And then, of course, commercial and office will benefit greatly from this. If you want to have a quartz material within the space and sort of be able to have different brands, different looks, especially if you're doing public spaces in a commercial area, this one is a great way of sort of blending with no matter what else you want to do within the space. And then London Royal, sort of a very grand look at a marble look. It extends sort of our London family a little bit. Great for multi-styling. It doesn't have a period necessarily to it. It doesn't look necessarily contemporary or traditional, or it could even be mid-century, depending on how you worked, what else you worked with it. It's a marvelous architectural design that is truly ageless as far as the space is concerned. And we pulled it into a kitchen for this to give it really nice on a waterfall edge to see how that patterning can look. That also gives you an idea what it could look like in a vertical application, which is just truly marvelous. It's a great family gathering space, or a material for a family gathering space, because it's fun to see. It's engaging without being too strong. Engaging is a key word that we use sometimes with our really strong. We like it with all of them, but especially our stronger aesthetics. Like, well, how do we engage with these in a big way? And this is a marvelous one to sort of have a little bit going on, but not too much. And we see this for almost all commercial applications, from hospitality, healthcare, to probably in public spaces for healthcare, retail, you name it. It's a great overarching classic marble look for any of those. So we looked at nature's canvas in a big way to look at all the diverse styles that come from that. What we could create with what nature offers us, and how we can interpret that from what we've had, how we move those further. Certainly in the case of the artistas, how do we move those further? How do we bring in new looks in calicuttas and marbles and make things that are designed for ease? We always want to be aesthetic leaders, but we're aesthetic leaders that we think that's very curated. Word is used a lot, but it's still very, very true here, that we curate them in the right way. We don't need to take a design and put it out there in 5 different colors right away. We think, what is the best one? What does the marketplace need? What do designers and architects ask for, homeowners, and then move the most beautiful thing we can possibly come up with at that moment. And then they offer just, with that respect, endless possibilities from all the product lines and designs and colors. And with that, I want to thank you very much for allowing the opportunity. We're very, very excited about what we've done. I hope I have shared that enthusiasm with you, and that you are excited about things as well. And John, I'll turn it back to you. I will figure out how I'm getting out of this now, so we can get back to our regular screen. There we go. And I'll take off the sharing so that you get to have your screen back. And then, of course, entertain questions.
All right, unmuted. Thanks, Mark. I know you played a significant role in the finished pieces of all these colors, and they're really breathtaking. Seeing them in a sample and then seeing them in an application, they just can really come to life, and no one can really unfold the story behind the inspiration and the story behind each of those colors. So thank you for that. If anybody has any questions or has a question or a comment, feel free to do so right now. And as we're waiting, so Willis officially launches these colors in the marketplace tomorrow. It is our official launch day. But for everybody here, if you're eager to get your hands on some samples, a couple of ways to do so: reach out to your local material application specialist, and he or she can definitely get you a set of these samples. If you require your sample box updated, certainly they can do that as well. But one little tip: we did open up our online ordering on our website at forwillis.com. So if you wanted to visit us there and place your orders there, that is only being announced here today. So the lucky few, if you guys want to get a jump on getting some samples in your hands, you can do it that way. We do have a chat here. Hello, clients and architects have been less inclined to Quartz because of the silica health hazard in production Can you speak to why we would spec Quartz at this present time, considering the concerns? Great question. Mark, I can reply with that if you want to. So yeah, great question. Certainly silica safety has been in the news recently. I think if you haven't read up on what Australia's done and banning quartz in that country, certainly California's kind of come down a little bit harder than some of the other states, but it is trickling through. I think our position here is the fabricators really need to work with OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to work closely with them to make sure they're abiding by the rules and keeping their employees safe. That is the utmost and first step. Certainly, DuPont stands behind their product, and there are certain fabrication requirements that are required when handling or cutting the material. And us as Willis, we do certify our fabricators, so they need to meet some certain stringent guidelines on being able to purchase the material from us. It is a fluid conversation, most definitely. Corian salt surface has no silica in it, but Corian quartz certainly does. But I really the onus falls on the fabricator to ensure that they're following the rules. And in Canada, that's WMIS, so you need to follow WMIS rules and guidelines. So as long as the material is handled properly, cut wet, masks are being worn, ventilation is proper anywhere, and really, we push it as hard as we can. But it also comes down from the consumer and the designers. When you're picking a fabricator or working with us, we can certainly help you guide you down that path. Pick the fabricator that is following the rules and keeping their employees safe. I hope that answers your question. But again, yes, an evolving storyline that's certainly going to get bigger as the days and months progress.
But it's good. And it is one of the marvelous things about solid surface.
Yeah, solid surface, completely silica free. And as things change and consumer buying habits change, things will morph. I do see that, quartz products in the months and years ahead are going to lower their silica content. And I know all the big manufacturers are moving towards that.
Yep.
So stay tuned. Any other comments or questions?
You're welcome. A thank you came through.
Yeah. Perfect. Good. Again, the answer is tricky, and I think every manufacturer is going to give you something different. But really, let's follow this. And again, it comes down to OSHA and following the rules.
John, I see. I'm going to work with you on this because we can.
Yeah, perfect.
Jennifer has her hand up. Jennifer, you're muted if you have a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering on the solid surface, the I believe it was the stone swept one.
Stonecrest smoke.
Yeah. If you had to refinish that, would that change the veining on the top of the countertop or the backsplash? If it, say, significantly got scratched or gouged or something like that, so that you can refinish it and take out the scratches or scuffs and stuff like that, would that change a little bit of that texturing on the top of that solid surface countertop?
Essentially, no, because it is through body. So the
Okay.
veining does run through. Of course, as you go through, it changes as it's going through the body. So if you went down too deep, you might see a difference. But no, hopefully you don't have to you don't have a scratch that deep that you have to go halfway through it.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of it, which is nice too when you see the size of it. You actually see elements of it. So.
No, great question, Jennifer.
Yeah,
that's a great question. These are some very new aesthetics for Corian solid surface that we probably haven't seen before in the past. And those questions are going to come up. But like Mark said, through body, all the way through, not just an eighth of an inch or a quarter of an inch. It does run all the way through.
Yeah. And you can see, actually, it's also helpful if you go onto the website, you can actually see them done. So those types of aesthetics will show it as an L shape in a countertop, just to give an idea as to what can be done with it for fabricators. But John had said earlier, it's one of the best things. I mean, I'm a practicing designer here in Maryland, or in outside of Washington, D.C. One of the best things you can always do is have a really good relationship with your fabricator. Because they can, and every once in a while, I'd like to spec something, and they'll go, hold on, step back for a moment. What do you want to achieve? And then we can make sure that in our conversation together, we get exactly the right outcome.
Great.
And they don't, and it doesn't drive them crazy because I've said, well, just make it work. That's, that's not fair.
Yeah.
So
Great.
that's a great relationship to have with fabricators.
Really good point there, Mark. I know that most fabricators, again, use technology. So when speccing some of these highly veined colors, there's a lot of different ways to do a corner. It could be mitered, or it could be butt edged. Ask your fabricator and push them to show you the different variations of how they're going to manage that corner, because you might like one thing and the customer might want something else, and then the fabricator might want to do it a different way, and they may all look great, but I would push your fabricator to say, show me my options on what the corner is going to look like, what the edge is going to look like. There's a lot of different ways to do an edge, miter, stacked, a lot of different, there's about 4 or 5 different ways to do an edge, all giving you maybe slightly different variation, and it really all comes down to preference on what that look is intended to be.
That's true. I mean, even in solid surface with routing, you can actually get curved and another look out of it, which is fascinating.
Yeah. Question or a comment from Stephanie. I think using the name Quartzite in the name of the color is going to confuse the consumer. When they're actually getting quartz? Fair comment. Fair comment. Yeah, the word quartzite is in this point a verb to kind of showcase what the color is intended to look like, and not necessarily the material itself. But very good point.
Well, it's very fair, and since I've been talking about the background of so many things we do, we struggle with that when we talk about Calcutta and marble and any of those, when it's a quartz look in marble, but it's still the adjective in a sense as well, the descriptor of it. So I think it's probably now people are used to having marbles and Calcutta looks in quartz, so that's not as much of a leap for them anymore. Quartzite looks are still new or newer in the quartz world. So it's a little bit up to that. I think that will change as consumers become aware of it. Oh, it's a quartzite look. So
yeah, good point. Just another comment here. Sorry, age has caught up with me. Love this design using the solid surface. When specifying these grooves, do you have standard dimensions in grooving, or is that up to the designer? Is this installation more expensive? So yeah, the design is totally flexible. You could have a routered, 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch. Again, the capability of the fabricator might vary, but something that's not really difficult to do. So hopefully that answers that. And is this installation more expensive? I would say yes, because that curve there. So one thing that has to happen is it needs to be routed, and then they put it into an oven, and then it comes out like spaghetti, and then put over over the piece, and then it needs to be formed. So yes, it would be definitely more expensive, but yeah, I love that. I love that image and that application. It just gives it the richness and the classic look of it, especially with the material choice or the aesthetic.
It's an amazing look. We actually did that. I don't think you've seen it yet, John, but it's for everybody else. We have a commercial sensor reception area in a hotel lobby, and there are columns on the sides that are routed in deep nocturne.
Okay.
So it's this look for everyone's here. It's this look, but it's a solid black. So you get this interesting shadow play, the black on black, on these end pieces. So
Yeah.
That image will show up. We haven't released all the images yet. That'll show up eventually.
Perfect. But again, in a application like that, again, I wouldn't say it's basic. A lot of fabricators can do that, but not every fabricator has a thermoforming machine. So again, it comes down to picking the right partner to create your vision. Well, I think we're at the top of the hour here. We're 1 minute away from 1 o'clock, so pretty good timing there for Mark. Thank you again, and for everybody participating. Appreciate you carving out some time in your day to spend with us. Again, as I mentioned, we are officially launching tomorrow. You're probably going to see some communications from us. We did record this, so I will send this recording out to everybody if you wanted to share it with your team, so they can get a better understanding of what's coming and what's released now. And if you want some samples, contact your local material application specialist or jump on our website and order the samples, and we'll have them delivered to you ASAP. I hope you have a wonderful day. And again, thank you for spending the time with us.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.